Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to discuss baby steps for new digital nomads. So this is a topic that somebody had written to me and kind of suggested, was that for people who are getting started, who maybe don't have experience as a digital nomad, etc., what are the things that they need to do? How do they do it? And this is a pretty diverse topic because there's lots of different possibilities, right? Do you go and live in a different country? Are you just spending a little bit of time traveling there? What are you doing in terms of your income? How does that all work, etc.? But I'm going to try and go through for you today a bunch of the baseline cases that might or might not matter to you, and kind of explain to you when they would matter and when they would not, so that you can have a little bit of a solid foundation. So before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the all notifications. Make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for being here on the channel. And if you'd like help with these topics that we talk about, which is international tax optimization, residencies, citizenships, building yourself a corporate structure, going and getting what solution is best for you in terms of banking, in terms of company formations, trusts, asset protection, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Okay. All right. So I think it kind of goes without saying that the first step of being a digital nomad is, of course, to have some location-independent income. Now, let's assume that you're not in that position. So obviously, some of you are already well along the way, etc., but I'm just going to really, really quickly go through some options for you. So you can go and find jobs potentially on places like Upwork. So that's an example. Fiverr is another one. There's many of these different sites that you can go and hire, and it depends on what it is that you're into. So for example, if you're a designer, then there's things like 99 Designs, and there's probably 10 different examples of something like that. There are a bunch like Upwork that you can go on to. Guru.com is one. There's a bunch. Anyway, you can go and check them out. So those are one option, right? The second thing is, of course, you can start a business that you are location independent. Now, you can also be in a situation when you're acting as a freelancer or location independent where you don't go through some sort of a job board or something. You might be just in a situation where, hey, you can work from anywhere. My one brother works in the 3D space. Now, in theory, he could work from anywhere, although he really kind of needs a lot of equipment, etc. So maybe not so good in that sense, but he just works for a regular employer. And increasingly, a lot of employers will let you work abroad. I've had lawyers who have consulted with me who, their employers have said, hey, they're welcome to go and live and work abroad. There's obviously developers who are in that situation. There's obviously designers, there's coaches, there's consultants, there's psychologists. A really good friend of mine runs a great personal training coaching company. So he helps personal trainers to become successful, and personal trainers kind of in the last year have had to work remotely. So, that's opened up a whole new level of freedom for them. So there's lots of options. And I think the whole point here is to, if you don't believe that you can, challenge your assumptions. Maybe you can't, right? But maybe there's a way. And so it helps to do that. Alternatively, if you're going to start a business, businesses that can be great, can be potentially something in HR, potentially something in, like I said, like marketing. Marketing's a big, strong area. Maybe some sort of coaching. It gets a little bit harder if you have to deal with people on specific time zones and you're in the opposite side of the world. It can be a little bit cumbersome, but that being said, not necessarily. Anything that you can do your deliverables from abroad, maybe there's some sort of research that you're doing, etc. Right? There's lots of options. So you're going to get that. Now, if you're in many of those, sometimes you're going to get your clients through networking. Sometimes you're going to get your clients through online groups. I would say online advertising is much harder. You're talking about like doing a more serious business at that stage, which can be perfectly reasonable, but depends on your circumstance, right? You could actually get local clients, right? You can do various different emailing and reaching out to people. You can call them. You can do all kinds of things. So any of those are potentially good options. From there, the question that some people might ask is, do you need to form a company? And well, the answer is, it depends a bit on your circumstance of how big you are and what your situation is in terms of your clients. Are your clients expecting to hire you as kind of an employee, or are they expecting to hire you as just somebody who they're going to pay, be invoiced? Okay. If you do need to form a company, then your whole situation becomes more complicated, because now you have to invoice people, you have to worry about separate banking, you have to worry about all these different things, which might be okay, right? Might be fine, but it's another layer of complexity. We're going to cover that in a second. if you're not in that situation, how are you going to get paid? So the things that are important to you as you travel abroad are paying your bills and getting paid, right? Very, very simple. So what are you going to do there? Well, if you're in a country that has easy, I wouldn't say online banking, but banking that you can do international transfers from online, then that can be a good option. Now, I'm here in Canada, and you can't do that in almost any bank in Canada, which is really remarkably terrible, right? So you usually would need to set up some sort of other bank account. I've done a review on TransferWise, which is now called Wise. I think that's a pretty good option for you. Some people may get Payoneer. That's a way to get paid, and you can get a card attached to it, which can allow you to spend some money, so that can be good. Some people will also get PayPal. They'll get paid in that way. I think that's a perfectly decent way to go for a lot of people, right? Other times you're going to have to go and get a bank account elsewhere, or maybe you can just use one locally. If you're in European banks, or I would say a lot of the Asian banks, you can just have your normal bank account. So that you go online, you send online wire transfers, you receive it, you pay money, etc. It's not too bad. You have a card connected. Very simple. Other countries you can't do that. So like I said, it depends a little bit on your circumstances, what is going to work for you. Okay. Now, if you're wanting to accept credit cards, then usually the easiest way is through Payoneer or through PayPal until you actually get to the stage where you're going to have something more significant. When you do, depending on the country you're in, maybe you could use something like Square, but usually Stripe is kind of like a default tool that you can use, stripe.com. You can go there. Relatively easy to get set up, but if they are operating in your country, right? And this would be once you have a business. So the question is, where would you have a business? Well, it really depends on where you're living. It depends on lots of factors. I've done a bunch of videos on this, so that's something to discuss and look at. It depends on your currencies. It depends on taxes. It depends on sales taxes. Lots of things. But you could potentially form a company. If you form a company, you're going to need to have some sort of accounting, probably. Now, the most basic accounting software that I would recommend is called Wave Accounting, waveapps.com. Okay, now they've recently changed so that they're no longer supporting all the different countries. So, in the absence of other things, that's, it might not work for you. But if you're in a country that supports it, great, you're off to a good start. If not, there's softwares like FreshBooks, Xero is spelled with an X, so xero.com, right? You may be in a situation where you need to keep track of things to do. You can get free software like asana.com. Trello, I don't think Trello is as good. It hasn't really been refreshed and updated so much lately. So let's say Asana. There's one called ClickUp that people quite like. There is another one called Monday.com. Usually you have to pay for that one for like more things, so maybe not quite so good. Some people like a software called Notion. That's not really so much for keeping track of things with notes, etc., but that's useful along with Evernote or OneNote. These are just different pieces of software. You normally want to make sure that you can keep everything synced. So you might lose a phone, you might lose a laptop, you might have some problem. I highly recommend syncing everything. If you're not already doing that, you should be. Really, no matter where you live, just makes your life way easier. The common ones that you'd use would be Google Drive, OneDrive, or Dropbox. Okay, those three, and you can just sync everything up so it's all in the cloud. Your documents, if you have it's like stuff you're typing, but also you could put, taking pictures of something like your passport, taking pictures of your birth certificate, taking pictures of all your important documents so they're stored and they're accessible there to you, can be useful. If you're in, and then you can have, obviously, access them wherever you go. In terms of being able to get phones, I really recommend, if people are in a situation where they need to access US numbers, to get Google Phone. That's quite useful. Google has actually a service now called Google Fi, which is an actual SIM card service where you can have a cell phone plan around the world, which is pretty cool. Otherwise, I usually, when I fly into a new place where I don't have a cell phone plan that covers it, I stop and get a SIM card at the airport rather than later. I've made the mistake of waiting till later, and then I have to find a place, and I have to stand in line, and it's much easier just to do it at the airport if you can. So that's something to be aware of. So then the question you might ask is, all right, so I've got some form of income, I've got a way to accept payment, I've got a way to send payments, right? Great, we're off to a good start. If I'm set up with, if I need some accounting, I've got some accounting. If I need to keep track of my things to do, I can do that. I use these different services for our business, such as Clarity. You can actually get business through Clarity, so clarity.fm. You can go and check out our profile and see you can basically charge people for consulting services which is great. It's just billed through Clarity. They have a central phone system and they schedule it, kind of nice. Otherwise, I use Calendly, which I tie directly into my email calendar. Usually the two main email services you'd use would be Google Apps or Office 365. I tend to use Office 365, but personal preference. I like the user interface in Outlook much more. I really don't like the Gmail interface, so personal preference again. You can go with that. Yeah, so those give you some basis. Then it becomes a question of, all right, where are you going to go? What are you going to set up? So there's a few different things to be aware of here. First of all, if you want to do trips, you can find tickets just by looking on sites like secretflying.com. You can find some good advanced options and take advantage of that. There's a few of them. I have an assistant who goes and looks and finds deals for me and books them, etc. But there's a few, and you can find some great travel hacker things that take place. You can also there's a few different services that they will get you discounts on business class or first class tickets, so that can be helpful, kind of cool. Often, it's not going to be cheap, but often cheaper than if you just buy retail. If you watch ahead a few months, you can usually get great deals, and also if you are aware of certain flight hubs, that can also be helpful for you. Certain places it's just cheaper to fly from than other places. That's the way that it goes. Generally speaking, if you're going to stay in a place for a short period of time, you don't need any visas. I would recommend, if you want to get the best deals on like a long-term stay, is to connect in some sort of a local Facebook group. And often there's somebody who's renting something out, or at least they have connections to something that's being rented out, and you don't have to pay as high a cost if you're trying to save money. So that's, again, useful. I find that Airbnbs are kind of disappointingly expensive in a lot of cases, and so that's not quite so attractive. You may want to consider your travel setup in terms of work. So you can get things such as this thing called the Nest, where it's just like a little foldable piece that can hold up your laptop and make it a little bit easier to interact with it. From an ergonomic standpoint, I always think it's better to have your monitor at eye level. So usually monitors are too low. You're like this, and then you're putting strain on your neck. Not so great. So better if you can have something like that. And to do that, you need some sort of a screen up there. Obviously, I'm in a hotel right now, so you can plug into HDMI often through some sort of a TV, and sometimes that works there. So if you have an HDMI adapter to your laptop, that would be one option to consider as well. Yeah. Then in terms of travel insurance, okay, so depending on how long you're out of the country and where you're going, you may want some sort of travel medical insurance. Now, if it's short term, the easiest usually is my credit cards have built-in travel medical for 31 days or something like that. So long as I'm doing a 31 day at a time or less deal, I can get free travel insurance. Amazing, great. American Express and a bunch of the big credit cards would have this. On the other hand, if you're going beyond that, you would need to buy. Now, often I find it's actually a pretty good deal just to buy directly through the credit card. So I'll just call the credit card company and tell them, okay, extend me. I'm going to be gone for an extra 2 months. Give me 90 days of coverage, right? That's one way to go. If you're going longer and you need something more flexible, the problem in those cases is you have to get the insurance before you leave the country. So as a result, you need to plan in advance. And what if you're kind of being flexible? Then there's some various different different services that you can get that can be useful for. I think one's called Cigna, C-I-G-N-A. But there's a bunch that you can look up and you can find that might be useful to you if that's something that you're concerned about. Obviously, having stuff like Uber and Grab on your phone is very useful for being able to get around. It's really useful, I find, to have a VPN in general, just because of the fact that sometimes you go to a country where you want one, and it's more difficult to get it once you're there. So having a VPN account that you've already got in advance before you go can be a useful little thing. Not necessary in most of the world, but there's a few places where it's helpful. I find that if you're going to book hotels, it's always different between the hotel booking apps. In theory, if you're booking last minute, probably something like Hotwire is the best deal, but then you don't really know what you're getting. So just depends, but usually you get reward points and things. So if, for example, you use like hotels.com, every 10th hotel room stay is free, and so you can kind of save some money that way. That might be useful to you. And let's see here. What other things can I tell you? These are kind of like a basic starting point. There's probably a million different questions that you have if you're getting started, And so, like maybe somebody asks, well, what about setting up a website? Okay, some people use Wix. Wix is really easy and has really gotten a lot more powerful for people over time. I'm somebody who tends to go a little bit more sophisticated, so WordPress is kind of like a more directional thing to go. Obviously, if you're doing some sort of e-commerce, then Shopify is sort of the default, although their integrations with payment processors is not that good. So that's something else to be aware of. Yeah, so those are a good starting point. I think that it's useful to try and network in advance before you go to places. The two ways that I think are easiest to network are to join Facebook groups in that place. Almost every major city that you would go to has a Facebook group that you can join. Or alternatively, using dating apps and kind of connecting with people that way. Obviously not so good if you're not single, but if you are single, that's another way to go. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'm sure share your experiences. People probably, in this video, have tons of advice. So if you have advice for people, put it below. And if you want any help with any of the topics that we deal with, please reach out to me, and I'm going to look forward to talking to you guys on the next video.